Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the NGS Member Connects meeting. My name is Bernice Alexander Bennett, and I'm a member of the NGS Membership Committee and MC for tonight's meeting. Tonight's topic is on empowering genealogists with artificial intelligence. It will help you understand the power of artificial intelligence, or AI, its limits, and how it can be harnessed for genealogy research. The moderator for tonight's program is Angela McGee. Angela Packer McGee is a certified genealogist with a passion for teaching genealogy. She is the education director for the National Genealogical Society and a trustee of the Board for Certification of Genealogists. Angela enjoys coordinating courses for the Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy and the Institute of Genealogy and Historical Research, and teaching at other genealogy conferences and institutes. Angela will introduce our speaker, Steve Little. On to you, Angela.
Thank you, Bernice. NGS is excited to bring this presentation to you tonight. We do have a large audience, so it would be helpful if you could mute yourself and turn your camera off during the presentation, as that would save bandwidth. At the end of the presentation, we will have you turn your cameras back on for visiting, but that will be after the Q&A section. So over the last 6 months, I've seen a lot of information online about using the new consumer artificial intelligence tools, sometimes with mixed results. Then I noticed Steve Little posting interesting topics on the Genealogy and Artificial Intelligence Facebook page. He was doing all kinds of interesting things with ChatGPT to save research time. I messaged him and we met in person at the NGS conference. I found him fascinating and asked him to do a program for NGS members on how to use AI for genealogy and also how not to use it. So before we dive into the presentation tonight, I want to do a little poll and just kind of get an idea of the experience that you have. Can you see that poll now, Steve?
Yes.
Okay, great. We'll give him a couple of minutes to answer the poll. This will help Steve gear his presentation, but great. A lot of responses have come in. We'll just wait a couple more seconds. We're at 88% have answered the poll.
Someone has requested doing the closed captioning, please.
Oh, let's see. How do I turn that on? Right here.
They are on.
Great. Thank you for that reminder. Okay, I think 93% have answered the poll. I think that's pretty good. So let's see the results. All right, so 60% beginners aware of the chatbots, but yet to explore. 33% novice, dabbling with the free tier chatbot services. 4% intermediate and 3% advanced. So we welcome all of you to this presentation tonight. All right, so by way of introduction, Steve Little is a seasoned professional with a rich and diverse career. His academic background includes a bachelor's degree in English, followed by master's work in applied linguistics, the pillar of today's large language models of artificial intelligence. Steve's first career spanned over 2 decades, during which he crafted information systems for various libraries and archives. Transitioning to a retirement career, Steve found a new passion as a professional genealogist with a special interest in the use of artificial intelligence in research and in genetic genealogy within endogamous communities. This role merges his lifelong interests in language, technology, and genealogy. So we welcome Steve as he presents this program on empowering genealogists with artificial intelligence. All to you, Steve.
Thank you, Angela. It is a great honor to be with y'all tonight. And it would be an amazing understatement to say it is exciting. This is exciting for me, an exciting night. And I hope it is for you, but it's not just been an exciting night. For many folks, it's been an exciting year. As Angela mentioned, I have 3 lifelong interests, probably shared with many of you, or all of you probably, genealogy, but also a love of language and technology. And as Angela mentioned, I had a first career building information systems in libraries. That was in my 20s and 30s. I spent my 30s and 40s, about another 20 years in the nonprofit sector. And I've started a third career in genealogy professionally about 5 years ago as I transitioned from the nonprofit work to full-time genealogy. But last year, something happened. I thought if I ever developed an expertise in genealogy, it would be with endogamous relationships, populations, and genetic genealogy. All 32 of my third great-grandparents had settled into one Appalachian county by 1820. And my 60 most recent ancestors were born, lived, and died there in Ashe County. So I had to get really good at endogamy. But last November, something happened that stole the focus away from genetic genealogy for me and for many other folks. You probably could not have avoided the hype after last November when a company called OpenAI released a product called ChatGPT. If you had not been paying attention, you may have thought that artificial intelligence was invented last December. But that's certainly not true. It's been around since the 1950s. In fact, it's been used in genealogy for quite some time. Most recently, there was a type of artificial intelligence called machine learning that was used to help with the handwriting recognition that made the census available to us to search. Instead of 9 months like it took 10 years ago, it was ready in, I think it was 9 days or even less. And if you received some of the pictures last year of when MyHeritage took your photographs that you would give them and they would make it look like you were dressed in the garb of your ancestors 300 years ago. Image generation, another kind of artificial intelligence. But what happened last November with ChatGPT was such a difference in degree. These chatbots became so much better, and the interface, the way we use them, became so much easier to use that it was almost as if it was a new thing. And over last December and January, folks got really excited about what they were experimenting with. And many folks started to see if this could be useful for genealogy. And it wasn't long before a community developed that started to try to find out how to put this new technology to work for genealogists. And the center of gravity for that community has been, as Angela mentioned, Blaine Bettinger's Facebook group called Genealogy and Artificial Intelligence. And so I'd like to share some of what I've learned this year and some of the other researchers and friends in that group. The poll that Angela put up earlier reflects very closely a similar poll I did in the spring, where you saw tonight that more than 90% of folks describe themselves as beginners and intermediate or novice users. And so I'm going to be very sensitive to that. There was an article out just the past week or two that talked about, although perhaps 75% of Americans had heard of ChatGPT, only about 15% had actually used it, and very few of those had actually used it with much regularity. And that reflects what we just saw. So I'm not going to assume that you know a lot about what artificial intelligence or ChatGPT is. Tonight is going to be a survey. Sometimes we'll be flying at 30,000 feet and getting a big picture. Other times we'll drop down to where the rubber meets the road and look at some things. But I hope that to give you a general introduction, and for the folks who are a bit more experienced, share some things that will be of interest to you too. So with that introduction, I will go ahead and start sharing my screen and we'll get started.
Steve, while you're sharing your screen, I just want to remind people that if they have questions, they can go ahead and put them in the chat. We're going to pull those out of the chat and ask Steve those questions at the end of his presentation.
Awesome. Well, since perhaps not many folks, or I won't assume that everybody has used ChatGPT before, what you see on your screen now is that what it looks like when you go to the website for OpenAI and ChatGPT. Before I start a little demonstration, I need to mention a little vocabulary. I abhor jargon and lingo, so I will try to limit any of the technological jargon and lingo as much as possible. So much so that the experienced folks here tonight may wonder if I even know what I'm talking about, because I'm going to be oversimplifying some things. But some of the words that we're going to be using tonight, the first, we're going to talk about use cases. Use cases are just discrete tasks that a chatbot or artificial intelligence can do. I'll also use the word text a lot, and someone let me know during one of our practice sessions that they weren't quite sure what I was talking about when I was talking about text. I'm talking about any kind of writing or input. It could be an obituary, it could be a spreadsheet, any kind of data or information. Sometimes I'll just generally call that a text. The other one is an interface. What you see on your screen is actually the web-based interface for ChatGPT. This is not the only way to access ChatGPT. And Angela, can you see my cursor moving around?
Yes,
I'm assuming
I can.
you can.
Yes.
Up here at the top, you'll notice where it says GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. The last little piece of terminology I want to mention is models. You can think of models as different versions or personalities of the artificial intelligence. And it's actually kind of helpful here. You see that one is called GPT 3.5. That's the slightly older version. And the current one is GPT 4. And so when I talk about models, I'm talking about the different kinds of versions of artificial intelligence. Now, if you've not used ChatGPT before, it is most similar, probably the most analogous experience you might have had is if you have texted somebody on your mobile phone, if you've had an SMS discussion, when you text back and forth. That's very much how you converse with ChatGPT. Down here at the bottom, you type in what is called the prompt, and up above, ChatGPT is going to respond. And so what I'd like to show you is a simple use case of just asking a question. But again, I want to let you know that a use case is just talking about something that GPT can do well. And you can I think of use cases, a couple of analogies, and this is worth spending 10 seconds on. A Swiss Army knife. Think about a big Swiss Army knife, the one that has lots of different gizmos in the Swiss Army knife. use cases or things that ChatGPT can do are like the different tools inside a Swiss Army knife. You may also think of them, I think of them as Lego blocks. There are different things that you can build with and do different things with. You may have a bucket of Lego blocks, but it's almost limitless what you can create with them. And finally, a bit of a strange way that to sometimes think about use cases as if you were Dr. Frankenstein building your monster in your laboratory and the body parts might be thought of as use cases. The different use cases we're going to be talking about tonight might be put together as a Swiss Army knife or Frankenstein's monster or something beautiful and wonderful you make with your Lego blocks. And so here is just a very brief, less than 1 minute interaction with ChatGPT where you will see me ask it a question. And you can see that I'm going to pause the video right there. I selected GPT-4 because I wanted to use the strongest, most current model available. And when I selected that, it gives me 3 options. I can use the default mode or these things called advanced data analysis or plugins. We'll talk about those later. This is the big thing. This is what people are willing to pay even a little bit of money for. About $20 a month gets you access to GPT-4. And that's the big deal. These are whistles and bells and icing on the cake and very valuable, but it is the access to GPT-4 that is well worth the $20. And I will continue the little demonstration. Whoops. And so I'm selecting GPT-4 and I'm selecting the default.
Okay.
And then in the prompt, you'll see where I typed, tell me about the genealogy proof standard. And all of a sudden, GPT just goes to town and starts talking back to me. And it really is a conversational experience. I won't show you a longer conversation, but I could have gone up and asked follow-up questions about this, and we could have had quite a dialogue. But for the folks who've never used ChatGPT before, this is what it looks like. You're typing in or copying and pasting information, and it responds to you. And just like on your telephone, when you look at a text message, you can scroll back and look at a conversation that you had earlier. You can do that with ChatGPT. You can look at the conversations you had yesterday or last week, or what you were just talking about 10 minutes ago. And so that's a little bit of just asking a simple question. I'd like to give you a couple other quick use cases just to give you a taste of what we're talking about. One of the ones that I have found very helpful and very good for demonstrating what these chatbots can do has to do with cleaning up and editing and proofreading. These kinds of chatbots are a type of artificial intelligence called large language models. They're very good at language. They're not so good with facts, but they are very powerful with manipulating language. And so what you see here is a newspaper article. This is a newspaper announcement of a wedding from one of my not direct ancestors, but a distant aunt several times removed. And you perhaps know that if you've tried to look for newspaper articles online, sometimes it's a challenge because what gets indexed is called the optical character recognition. Some time ago, perhaps decades ago, a computer scanned this newspaper article and tried to read it and tried to turn these words into actual text that you could search for. And if you look over here, this is what it ended up with. The optical character recognition is sometimes almost illegible. And that's why it's sometimes so difficult to find information about your relatives in documents that have been scanned and processed. The optical character recognition, that kind of artificial intelligence, machine learning, sometimes you'll hear folks use the statistic, it's good for about 85 or 80%. Well, 85 or 80 or 85% of what? Does that mean that it's getting, if you have a 5-page article, it gets 80% right, that it gets 4 pages right and 1 page wrong? No. Is it getting every 4 out of 5 paragraphs right and getting 1 paragraph wrong? No. What most people think is it's maybe getting 80% of the words right and only getting maybe 10 or 20% wrong, but it's not even the words, it's the characters. So upwards of 20% of individual characters, it gets wrong, which means that if you have a word that is more than 5 letters long, the optical character recognition probably has at least 1 letter incorrect. And that's what makes it so hard. I have linguists have a tool that's very helpful for comparing different varieties of text. And what you see here on the left is the raw OCR that the newspaper vendor provided. And in the dark red are words that are different than the one in green. One of the things I did when I found this article, I went through and typed it myself so that this copy is perfectly clean. There are no mistakes. Actually, there's one. I noticed that where there's an M dash here, I had 2 N dashes. But otherwise, this is a perfect copy of what appeared in the newspaper half a century or longer ago. And then I gave it, I fed into ChatGPT this raw text, and with a prompt, I told it to clean it up, and it did. It found and fixed 49 out of 56 mistakes. There were 56 ways that the perfect text was different than the OCR, and the ChatGPT found and fixed 49 of them. And it was even better than that. The several that it didn't correct, I wouldn't even call those errors. It did very clever things, like if you have a name like Kelly or Leslie, that could be a boy or a girl's name. The artificial intelligence didn't want to assume, so it used a plural pronoun. So even those mistakes were not really mistakes. And so the primary thing that, or one of the most important things that ChatGPT is very good at is cleaning up text. A second thing that it's very good at is it's good at taking information and extracting it from something that you have given it. In this example, I gave it an obituary, and I told it to go through and read the obituary and to extract the names of anybody mentioned in the obituary that was a relative of the deceased. And it did. And not only that, I asked it to show me the proof. I wanted to see why it thought that Martha was the wife of James. And sure enough, it included, because I told it to, the evidence of that. And so it created this table. Now, it didn't, I could have asked it to do something other than a table, but just for demonstration purposes, I had it do a table. Here's a third example. Again, this has to do with cleaning up some text. Many of you perhaps use a genealogy program that will create reports for you. I'm a longtime user of RootsMagic, but because I'm sometimes in a hurry to get things done, and sometimes the data in my RootsMagic database has duplicate sources or other information. And when you have RootsMagic or any other genealogy software run a report on a person, it will go through and this is what you can see RootsMagic created. And you can see it's a bit, it's not something that you could readily use. It's very repetitive. There's a full sentence for when somebody lived for each point in the census. There's lots of repetition. So I gave this kind of messy, raw narrative report to ChatGPT and said, clean it up. And in seconds it did. And it produced that clean text. And so it's very, very good at cleaning up text and lots of other things. Before we get into some of the other examples, though, as folks have perhaps heard, there's some concerns, there's some cautions, there's some limits. It might be an exaggeration to say that there's danger, but there are some, in an exaggerated sense, I sometimes think of them as landmines. There's ways that it can go wrong. And so being aware of those, last December, January, and February, all of us made lots of mistakes and odd things would happen. And we weren't sure why things were going wrong. And so we started to map these limits, that we started to write down what GPT didn't do well. And said, that's a little strange. But before we even start to talk about some of the technical limits of ChatGPT, there's a couple other kind of limits I want you to think about that will also come into play during your interactions with ChatGPT. One is a limit from genealogy. A second kind of limits has to do with us. And then we'll address the technical limits of ChatGPT and other chatbots. First, the limit of genealogy. When you think about what genealogy is, most of us are trying to do some serious, responsible, fact-based scholarship. And at the highest standard, you want to be able to produce peer-reviewed scholarship. And so if you're more interested in doing mythology, if you're or you are an advertising executive on Madison Avenue and you want to sell widgets, you can use ChatGPT you don't need to be concerned about those limits at all if you're writing mythology or advertising copy. But if you're trying to limit yourself to fact-based empirical work, that limit comes from us. And so that's a limit of genealogy, one of our standards. When we talk about the limits that we have, again, this is the poll that I took in April, and you'll see that it is very close to what we saw tonight. More than 90% of folks describe themselves as beginners and novices. Well, what sort of limits do beginners and novices bring to the experience? One, there's a learning curve. You just may not know how to do some things. And so that's a little bit of a limit, but we can get over it. Two, there's a little bit of fear. Some folks are sometimes a little bit afraid of new things, or the changes that are coming so fast may be disturbing to some folks. And so those are some of our own limits that we bring to the experience. There's also personal things that other folks may experience that influence. When you talk to folks about artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, sometimes you'll run into folks who seem to have an extreme perspective. And there's on two sides of the spectrum. There's some folks who are just beyond enthusiastic. I'm enthusiastic, but beyond that, there are hypesters. There's folks trying to make a quick buck, and so there's a lot of exaggeration and hype, and overstatements and exaggerated claims, and so that's something we need to be aware of. On the other end of the spectrum, from the hypesters, you have the doomsters, the folks who think that this is going to be the Terminator, that this is the beginning of Skynet, that this is the beginning of the end. I am proposing a middle way where we have a bit more reality based about being aware of the limits and benefits and trying to find something that is useful without being fear-based or exaggerated. Now, when most people first sit down to use ChatGPT, the experience of many folks is quite similar. When you first sit down, this vertical axis is measuring confidence, how confident you feel on using this tool. And when you first sit down and use it, you don't feel any confidence at all. But after about 10 minutes, you're like, holy cow, this is doing amazing stuff. But then you start to notice, wait a second, it is getting some things wrong. It is flat out making stuff up. And that's when you start to feel deflated. And many of us experienced this last December, January, February. I had this experience when I was looking up genetic genealogy and wanted to see what ChatGPT knew or could tell me. And I asked it for the 3 most important authors on genetic genealogy. And having just finished a year studying 5 different classes, I knew the first 2 names, and the third name it just totally made up a third name. And so that's when I was like, wait a second, what is going on here? But then with a bit more experience and you learn what the limits are and how you can actually use these things responsibly, and we'll talk about how to handle the limits, you start to get to a more realistic place. You're not as enthusiastic as you might have been 10 minutes in, but when you get to here, you're being productive and responsible. Now, let's get back to a bit more what we can do with this. But as we address the limits of ChatGPT, before we can talk about the limits of ChatGPT, we need to know a little bit about artificial intelligence. And so this is just a few moments of theory and background information just to get us oriented as to what we're talking about when we talk about ChatGPT or large language models or chatbots. Artificial intelligence, as I mentioned, is a large field, and many of these have been around since the 1950s. The handwriting recognition that we talked about that was used for the census is using machine learning. The images that MyHeritage produced uses artificial intelligence image generation. We'll talk briefly about text-to-speech and speech-to-text, but what we're really talking about tonight is this. These are just the other things. This is where the excitement has been the past 10 months. This is my background. Angela mentioned my graduate work is applied linguistics. My emphasis was in natural language processing and computational linguistics. And although I left library work in 2007, it's always been an interest. And so when this broke into the scene last December, these are the kind of things that large language models, chatbots, and ChatGPT are doing very well. It can look at a text and do content extraction. It can tell you what kind of text it is. It can do different kinds of translation. It can answer questions. There's a little bit of an asterisk there because it's got no compunction about whether it's truthful or reality-based or not, but it'll answer your question. And it does that by generating text in flawless, perfect grammar. It is just incredible how well and good it is at creating language. Now, within these new things that started popping up, they actually did not just appear last December. One of the early things I discovered in my research, I did a Google search for ChatGPT and genealogy. And one of the things I was pleased to stumble across was the family tree of ChatGPT. You can see ChatGPT and GPT-4 here, and it looks almost like a family tree. And sure enough, you can see these are its predecessors. And if you'll notice, though, it goes back to about 2018. That's not very old. In 2017, Google was actually the leader of this field, and they released a paper in 2017 and other resources that really gave birth to all of this. And so that's why we will not write Google out. They're a little bit behind now. They took an early lead, but they made some responsible decisions in 2017, 2018, and slowed things down a bit. But the development continued. And when this came out at the beginning of late 22, early 23, this was such a difference in degree that it almost became a difference in kind. It became so much easier to use and so much more useful. That explains a bit about why it became so popular so fast. So if we want to understand the limits of ChatGPT, we have to understand a little bit about how they work. And we didn't know a lot about that in December and January and February until some folks did. And if you were listening to the right folks, they would tell you. But a very important article came out in February of last year. Stephen Wolfram, who is famous for making some, if you've ever taken a math class and had to use some of the Wolfram math resources, it's that person. He's been working with artificial intelligence for 50 years. He wrote an article in February that very simply just stated that it's figuring out the next right word. And I can give you an example of this. I can almost magically make several hundred of you think of all of you the next word. If I utter the phrase, Old MacDonald had a, and 500 people say farm, because you knew the next word after Old MacDonald had is going to be farm. Well, what these large language models have done is they have read just about anything that was on the internet and more. They have scoured just incredible volumes of information and text, and they have looked at the words, and actually it's not just the words, it's smaller than the words. It's more akin to a syllable or a morpheme, but they look at them and they see when two words are used together, how closely related are they? And so what ChatGPT and other large language models are doing, very simply enough for us to be functional and understand, is it's just picking the next right, what it thinks is the next most likely word. Now that has some consequences because if you think about what it's doing, all it is doing is picking the next right word. Now, when we think about what are the consequences of picking the next right word when we're talking with it, this is where some of the limits come in, some of the things that ChatGPT and other large language models don't do well. One, they are not a search engine. One of the things that folks called ChatGPT, when it first came out, was a Google killer because they thought it may replace Google as a search engine. But it quickly became apparent that it is not a search engine. It is not going out and referencing Wikipedia or the movie schedule or anything else. All it is doing is trying to figure out the next right word, which also means that it's not a genie or a magic librarian who is going to take care of your research questions for you. Now, we want to be aware of these limits, because just like if you were to find yourself in a minefield, part of surviving that experience is being aware that you're in a minefield. And if you're in a minefield, you want to avoid the mines or mitigate them. Perhaps you might explode the mines. Each of these limits can be avoided or mitigated. And some of the limits we're talking about is how they are untethered to reality. They're poor at math. Don't use it as a calculator. It's poor at negation. And by that, I mean, none of us like being told no, but sometimes the large language models just don't understand it. And so there's ways to mitigate. Instead of telling it not to do something, you can try to phrase it in a positive way. And so instead of saying, do not include this, what's a different way of saying do not include? You could say omit or skip or avoid. So you try to find a positive way to not use the word not or no. The training data that is used to build what it thinks might be the next right word can be dated or biased. And there's discussions about whether it is copyright protected. The input, what we can actually give the chatbots, is limited. And so mostly we're working with text, but some artificial intelligence let us put in images or pictures. But even the ones that limit us to text, the amount of text we can use is limited. So these are some of the different kinds of large language models out there. The one that we will be focusing most on, the first three rows, are the ones offered by the company OpenAI. And this is the one that first became very popular, released last December, and quite capable, but was soon upgraded by GPT-4. This is the version that includes the whistles and bells that I mentioned. This is the one that costs $20 a month, and this version is free. You can actually use GPT-4 in a Microsoft product. Microsoft has partnered with OpenAI to offer GPT-4 for free, but it's limited. It's one, you have to use the Microsoft Edge browser, which I don't always do. And their user interface is not as slick and useful. So although you can use Bing to access GPT-4, it's not the best experience. There's Bard is the large language model offered by Google. And currently this one is still third or fourth place, but don't write Google out. You should expect that they will come back. The one I would like to mention to make you aware of, if you weren't, there was some folks who left the company OpenAI and formed their own company called Anthropic. They have a chatbot called Claude that's almost as good as GPT-4, but not quite. But what it does offer is, instead of only being able to input 6 pages at a time, you can input 60 pages at a time. So Anthropic is very good at large amounts of text. Okay. Now, if these are the limits, what are the solutions? How do we avoid these? And the first, as I mentioned, is being aware of the limits themselves and avoiding them or mitigating them. Another way to think about limits is that these limits will be overcome. And we've already seen this year that there are things that the chatbots couldn't do in February or March that now they can. And so despite the risk, the benefits outweigh the risk for most folks. And those benefits are efficiency and productivity. You'll be able to do some tasks very much faster, and that frees you up to do creative and inspiring things. And the artificial intelligence itself can be used to do creative and inspiring things. And it might give you the ability to do things that you couldn't otherwise do yourself. And so with that introduction, here's some of the rubber meets the road details as we start to move into finishing up. When you talk to ChatGPT, again, your input is called a prompt. And again, if you're doing mythology or creative writing or poetry or writing advertising copy, you may not be concerned about the limits. But if you're trying to do genealogy, this is a way that you can try to mitigate those minefields, to avoid the minefield altogether. And the first, the way I have found helpful to talk to the chatbot is when I am doing genealogy work, I use a prompt that often has 5 parts. And this is transferable not just for genealogy, but lots of other folks will find this useful too. You give the chatbot a role, a goal, a text, a task, and a flask. Now, the role is you're telling the chatbot the kind of expert you would like to talk to. And so frequently I will tell it that you are an expert genealogist, but sometimes I will tell it that at the same time you are an expert data analyst, or you are a genealogist and an editor, or you are a genealogist and anything else that may be handy there. You can assign more than one role at a time. The goal is very simply state to the chatbot what you want. Make your expectations known. One of the things we see people when they have disappointing experiences, they're not being honest with the chatbot about what they want. They're trying to trick it. Well, if you tell it what you want, if you give it a goal, it will try to meet that goal. Now, the one in the middle, this is how we avoid and mitigate the risk that comes with a chatbot that has a propensity to hallucinate, to make up information. You can constrain it. You can stay in this sandbox. I'm going to give you some information, and I want you to limit your responses to just what I'm giving you. So I may give it an obituary, a wedding announcement. I may give it a spreadsheet or some other sort of input. And by giving it the information I want it to work on, it mitigates tremendously any concern about hallucinations. Because one of the concerns we noticed very early was that these chatbots are good with words, not facts. We don't ask it to find facts itself. The mantra for 2023 has been, we use the chatbots to process information, not gather information. And finally, the task. We kind of break down not just the goal, but the steps that we might want the chatbot to do to get there. And you may give it, if you want it to, especially if you have trouble getting the results you want, you may go back and revise your prompt and give it a little bit more detail on how to use your input to accomplish the goal. Finally, the flask. That's a bit playful. I picked that word just because it rhymed. A role, a goal, a text, a task, a flask. The flask is what you want your result to look like. Do you want a picture? Do you want a video? Do you want audio recording? Do you want a spreadsheet? Do you want a database? Do you want or just a report, just a paragraph of information? If you tell it the kind of response it should have, it will try to accommodate that. And so we give it a role, a goal, a text, a task, and a flask. Now, a couple other use cases that folks have found very helpful. Translation. Many of you may know Yvette, the Dutch genealogist. She was one of the first to discover and talk about and share with the community how good ChatGPT is at translating from one language to another. But there's not just translating from one language to another that we've discovered is amazingly powerful. It can do other kinds of translation. Here, one of our colleagues in the Facebook group, Rand, discovered in April that it can translate not just between languages, but language styles from era to era. He had a letter from 1882 that was difficult to read, just like a high school student may find Chaucer or Shakespeare difficult to read. ChatGPT is excellent at taking an older style of language, and you can ask it to modernize this language. Or it can do something like take a legal document that's hard to understand, and you could say, take this legal document and explain this to me in plain English. Or you may take a 6-page probate file and say, just give me an executive summary of what's in this probate file. Finally, it will also translate between styles. If you have something that's in a scholarly style, but you want that to be in a blog post, it can quickly take your own scholarly article and rewrite that in more of a style appropriate for a blog post or even a tweet. So it's very good at translating languages. Now, as we wrap up, I want to mention some of the more advanced uses that you may be able to do. Remember when I mentioned that use cases are kind of like Legos? Well, imagine all the different ways you can put Legos together. Prompt chaining means using the output from one interaction as the input for the next one. So you may have, for example, an obituary, and you may have it extract the information from the obituary, but you may also have a wedding announcement, and you'll do the same thing for that. But then going even further back in time, you may find a birth announcement. And so these pieces of information, then you could use to say, combine these things, these extracted reports into one narrative story. And so prompt chaining is just all the different ways that you can combine these use cases. Right now, this is done manually. We kind of have to take the results from what we got on our first interaction and use that as the input for the next. One of the things that will be coming is the artificial intelligence itself will be aware of the use cases and help us with that. One of the use cases I enjoy and get a lot of use out of is transcription of audio. And this is one that is not as readily available in ChatGPT. You can't upload audio files into the web-based interface, but there's other ways to do that. And it will take an audio recording and turn that into a text transcript. And then you can take that text transcript and do all the other things we've done before. For example, I had a 50-minute discussion with some folks and I saved the transcript. And then I said, okay, ChatGPT, I want you to take this 50-minute conversation. And now that you have the text, I want you to summarize that whole conversation. And if you saw the news today, Zoom is now going to be including some of these things in their features. So if you finish the Zoom meeting, you might soon be able to hit a button and it will give you an executive summary of what you just talked about. Plugins. When you use the ChatGPT Plus, other people can create superpowers or extra features or abilities. Plugins, there are now 700 little additional ways that you can use ChatGPT. For example, normally you cannot upload a PDF file, but using a plugin, you can. Normally, ChatGPT does not create diagrams or charts, but using a plugin, you can. Normally, you can't ask ChatGPT to reach out to a website and summarize it for you, but using a plugin, you can. So plugins are the ways you get additional capabilities for ChatGPT. This last one, it used to be called Code Interpreter, but it's now called Advanced Data Analysis. ChatGPT will give you access to a Python programmer. Even if you've never done any programming, computer programming before in your life, if you just have the vaguest idea of how a computer program works, you can talk to ChatGPT as if it was your own personal programmer. And it will write little programs for you and analyze the data that you give it. And the data that you give it can be quite significant. Normally, we can only upload about 6 pages of text to ChatGPT, but using Code Interpreter or Advanced Data Analysis, you can upload 100 megabytes of information, which is significant. That's more than a novel, easily more than a novel, and it will work on that information. Now, as we're rounding third base, I wanted to mention something because as I talked about, ChatGPT is not just for genealogists. The whole world is finding ways to use this. And one of the things that I am encouraging folks to do is to be aware of, first, ChatGPT Plus does cost $20 a month, but you can easily get it to make your $20 a month back just from the day-to-day tasks that you'll find it being useful for. And I'll give you some examples. Transcription, summarization, data extraction, copying and proofreading, text management, and learning how to do something. It does all these things that may not be related directly to genealogy, but it does them very well, so much so that you'll find that you're making your $20 a month back very quickly. This was made evident just this week when some of you may have seen this. The Mayo Clinic released a peer-reviewed study that showed that plastic surgeons cut their time from writing operation notes from 7 minutes to 5 seconds. From 7 minutes to 5 seconds. Now that's saving more than 6 minutes. Now, if you just do that 10 times, if you find a task that saves you 6 minutes 10 times, that's your hour. That's $20 worth of your time, and you've made your money back very quickly. And so I encourage you to find these dual uses, because imagine if you were finished with genealogy. If you finished all your genealogy and you were done, would you sell your laptop or your computer? Would you disconnect your house from electricity because your genealogy was done? No, you used electricity and your computer, not just for genealogy, but lots of other things. Artificial intelligence is going to be like that. We're going to use it for lots of things, not just genealogy. And it will quickly earn back that $20 a month. Now, the last 2 or 3 things I want to talk about are privacy and ethics. When you're talking to ChatGPT, normally it can record and keep track of your conversation. If you want to go back and revisit a conversation that you had with ChatGPT yesterday or in January, it will do that if you want it to. You may not want to. I do not use information from living people in my work. For example, this is a cemetery. I uploaded a database of a Roots Magic database that I keep for a cemetery. So all the people here were already dead. But I asked it to show me a network graph of how the people in the cemetery were related to each other. But if it was living people, you may want to turn off some of these things so that it doesn't record the names of living people or DNA information, or don't use it to balance your checkbook. But if you did, if you weren't paying attention, you could go back and delete that conversation. Now, the final thing we want to talk about is ethics. This is so new that the rules on how we use this haven't been made up yet. And so the discussion on ethics and artificial intelligence is just beginning. And there's two areas that we want to be mindful of when we talk about the ethics. What's an acceptable use? Should you be uploading identifiable genetic information from living people? That's probably going to be a no. But for example, you also heard that there was a lawyer who got in big trouble because he tried to do his legal research using ChatGPT, and the judge slapped him and gave him a pretty substantial fine. So what's acceptable use? We're going to have to figure that out. The other thing is disclosure. When do you have to tell other people that you have used artificial intelligence to produce something? When you create a client report or any kind of genealogy work, you don't put on the title page that you used Microsoft Word and a spell checker. You don't put that you used Grammarly to perhaps check your grammar. ChatGPT will do those things, but it will also go further than that. It will rewrite your report. It will write it itself. But then there's ethical questions on who's actually doing the work there. To stay out of that minefield when I'm using ChatGPT as a proofreader or copy editor, instead of saying revise this, I will say examine this and create a list of suggestions. What show me the mechanical errors? Normally, I might have it fix those, but it might say, suggest how I might do the transitions better. But give me that as a bullet point list. Let me go back and do those myself. There's a good article about these ethic questions in the July 7th, 2023 ethicist column in the New York Times. Now, our last slide here, the future of artificial intelligence in genealogy. The use cases will grow. We only mentioned a half dozen tonight. There's already well more than a dozen, and we discovered a new one yesterday. One of the folks who may be joining us from Australia tonight, Andrew, mentioned that he was using ChatGPT to create pivot tables. Now, if you an Excel user, maybe you've heard of pivot tables, but it's a little bit beyond your comprehension. That's a new use case where it will create pivot tables for you. These use cases will continue to grow. As the models, the varieties get stronger, ChatGPT will be able to do new things. The amount of information we can give it will increase. For example, right now we might be limited to 6 pages. That's going to quickly grow and grow and grow. Finally, it's going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And lastly, you're going to have help. Soon there will probably be AI agents and assistants to help you with this. Before we head into the question and answer, I want to let you know that there is a handout available, but it's a bit of an exercise. So here's how you get the handout. This video is going to be uploaded to YouTube, and give it a couple days, maybe even a week. But you can go back and watch this video on YouTube and jump to the 53-minute mark in the video. And you'll hear me give, and I'm talking to you in the future right now, a week from now, how you get the handout. You can actually copy and paste the whole transcript from YouTube. When you look at this YouTube video, if you select the closed caption button, it will also show you the transcript of everything that I've just spoken to you. YouTube actually does free audio transcription. When it creates the closed captioning for videos, you can copy and paste that transcript. Your homework assignment, if you want a handout, and I really want you to do this, you can do this. This isn't not an intermediate or advanced task. This is a beginner task. I want you to copy and paste that YouTube transcript of everything I just talked about for 54 minutes. Put it into probably Claude or ChatGPT. It may, a bit verbose. Claude can handle a 50-minute conversation, the text. Tell it to create a 2-page handout. Give it a prompt such as this. You are an expert transcriptionist and you are an expert writer. Your goal is to create a 2-page handout. Find below the transcript for a presentation. Your task is to extract the most salient and important information from the transcript and use that to create a 2-page handout. And you're going to be amazed. I want you to join the Genealogy and Artificial Intelligence group at Facebook and find the place where Angela shared this discussion and share with us your 2-page handout that you created. And that's it. I'm at 55 minutes. I appreciate everything. It's been a thank you to everybody with the National Genealogical Society, most especially Blaine Bettinger, Yvette, all the other folks at the Facebook group, Andrew, Mark, too many to name. You have helped me out so much this year. I hope everyone else will join us. And with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Angela while I take a sip of water, and I'm glad to answer questions and hang out with y'all for as long as you would like.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I want to bring in 2 things from the chat, and then I want to get to the questions because there's about 20 of them. So we're going to have, less than 1 minute each. But somebody said, whew, I know I can definitely do this, right? That was our goal, to empower people to be able to use this. Another one said, I work at Microsoft and I know a bit about this, and this was a spectacular presentation. So thank you, Steve. We're going to go straight to the questions. And again, this is going to be question, answer, so we could do as many as possible. And then after that, we'll open it up for people to talk and chat. All right. As AI progresses, do you think that individuals will need to use AI to get better results from their research, or will vendors begin to employ the technology to improve their own records?
Probably both. The one that I'm looking forward to, and if there's anybody in these organizations, the first newspaper vendor to go back and work with their own raw OCR, the newspapers you scanned 50 years ago and did the OCR 40, 30 years ago, there's nothing sacred about those old OCR text. You could use artificial intelligence to clean up that OCR text and re-index that. You don't have to get rid of the old stuff, but the first newspaper vendor to do that is just it's gonna be a gold mine, because newspapers and other things where they go back and clean up that OCR, that's not something that you and I can do. But the commercial vendors and the big archives, when they go back and clean up their OCR and re-index it, that's going to be huge. The other big one, and I don't know if this is going to happen in 2 months or 2 years or 20 years, it's the holy grail, is handwriting recognition. When handwriting recognition gets to be as good as speech recognition, that's going to blow open not just genealogy, but all history research. Social science is going to be revolutionized when we can go back and and scan in and have good scans of journals, diaries, letters, all the documents that have been scanned but never indexed because they're handwritten. When that gets done, that's going to be huge. I don't know if I
That
got
was
the
a
second part of that
great
question. or not.
answer, but the
Okay.
rest have to be a little faster.
Okay.
Do these chatbots use languages other than English?
Yes, yes. If you start to speak to it in French, it will respond in French. If it very much mirrors your tone of voice. If you say please and thank you, it will respond please and thank you. If you start cussing and screaming, it'll start cussing and screaming. But yes, now not all languages are equal. We talked about the training data. The vast majority of the training data was English, so it's better in English. Now, I've seen some graphs that show the languages. The more language that it was trained on, the better it is. But yes, it's amazing how many different languages it will work in.
Okay. How did it come up with the answer about the genealogical proof standard if it wasn't looking things up somewhere?
The next word, Old MacDonald had the genealogical proof standard is ... Well, it starts looking for the next word after is, and then it reprocesses and starts looking, the genealogical proof standard is and then just one word at a time.
From the training data, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. I hope this has enough information. I'm curious, how do you cite those passages since they were generated elsewhere?
That's a great question. Now, it depends on what you're actually citing. For example, if you're looking at an obituary and you're extracting the text from an obituary, I would use the information, the source of the original obituary. If you're talking about something more creative that it has done, those are questions that are still being worked out because OpenAI says that we don't own what it generates. It's yours, but then the courts have also yet to weigh in on who owns what comes out. And so some of these questions don't have yet easy and clear answers. And so we'll have to talk about these individual cases as they come up. Good discussion in the Facebook group.
Okay, do you see in the near future an AI tool that is tailored to genealogy?
Yeah, I kind of work on that myself. I have a website called AI Genealogy Insights. And in addition to cataloging these use cases and keeping track of developments, we're also working on very simple how to do these small things. For example, one of the things I'd like to be able to make available to folks more quickly than not is the audio transcripts. Being able to upload, if you've got an audio of your great-grandfather from 40 years ago that you happen to make on a tape deck in the 70s, making something like that available we're close. And I imagine others will be too.
Okay, somebody asked about the video on YouTube, if that will be free, because they didn't want to pay to get a handout. So yes, that will be on the NGS YouTube channel. This is a Member Connects event, and so it will be available to you. Okay.
And then you can grab the transcript from YouTube for free. And then you could use the free version of ChatGPT or Claude, Anthropic's Claude. That's the one that can handle longer documents. So if the transcript is more than 6 pages, Claude will easily take that transcript and create a handout for you.
I love that you gave him a homework assignment to actually work with the AI. Okay, in the same way that hints or leaves on Ancestry.com can lead people down the wrong path when doing their family history research, what are some of the perils in allowing AI to determine our ancestors for us?
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. It's like the joke where the man goes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, it hurts when I do that." Well, don't do that. The mantra for 2023 is, if you're doing genealogy work, use it to process information, not gather information, not research information. Now, we may be there in 6 months or 6 years. I don't know. But this summer and fall, don't use it for that. And if you do, don't get upset with ChatGPT or me when it starts lying to you, because we have given you the map to the minefield. Don't do that.
Okay. Can it do your citations correctly if you give it the source info?
I've had mixed results. One of the things that Andrew in Australia was very good about, he created a very good slide for how to create a prompt too. If you give it examples of what your results should look like, it will learn from your examples. So if you have a template of what a proper citation will look like, and you have the input, you can do it. I don't trust it yet, but
Okay.
your results may vary.
Can ChatGPT transcribe handwriting?
Well, sort of, kind of. ChatGPT cannot, because it cannot process images. Some of the other AIs can process images. We expect that ChatGPT will soon be able to process images, because they told us on March 17th, I remember the date, they told us on March 17th that image processing was coming. And my hope is that the image processing will have some rudimentary handwriting recognition. Evidently, the facial recognition was a little too good and a little too scary, and so they have not released the image processing yet. But I'm hoping that when we can upload images to GPT-4, that some rudimentary handwriting recognition might be there. But it's such a holy grail. I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay. Is there a way to use ChatGPT's code to generate a network diagram for ancestry DNA matches?
Probably. You would want to use the code interpreter or the data analyst. And just the same way that with DNA matches, you use in common with files. Cousin A is related to these 600 people. Cousin B is related to these 800 different people. If you were to find a way to upload that to ChatGPT in a way that was not identifying any folks, you could ask it to create a network graph from that information. And iteration. I rarely do I get the result I want the first time. Go back, and if it gets close, tell it it could do better. One of the experts who's really good at this just says he keeps telling ChatGPT, "That's close, but try again, do better." But yes, code interpreter or data analyst, if you give it the right input, it generated the network graph that you saw, was that one that I created from a RootsMagic database.
Okay, more questions have come in, so I have to be a little bit selective in the time we have. But let's see. Are plugins a premium feature?
Only in the sense that you have to be a ChatGPT Plus subscriber. So that's the $20 a month. When you pay the $20 a month, the big deal is you get access to GPT-4. As a bonus, you get access to the plugins. And there's now more than, I think, 700 different plugins. So it's included in that $20 a month.
Okay, how do you give ChatGPT your text or article?
Copy and paste. Copy and paste. If you're using the web-based interface, now if you're using the code interpreter or the data analyst, you can actually upload a file, and you can upload a zip file. So if you have a bunch of little files, you zip them together, and as long as they're smaller than 100 megabytes, it will open up that archive of zipped files and process them.
Okay, you said that you can restrain its input to an obit or a spreadsheet. Does that mean you can attach a file for it to read?
Pretty much the same question. Using code interpreter or the data advanced data analysis, yes, you can upload up to 100 megabytes.
Okay, my big concern with ChatGPT is privacy. I gather that whatever you type in becomes part of its learning, and you may be compromising info that's not even yours. Can you speak to those concerns?
You can turn that off. You can turn that feature off. The last slide I showed you, there's a place where you can go into the settings and you can turn off chat history. And it won't use your information for training. And I mean, if you trust the people, if you trust OpenAI, and I have, they say that they don't save those conversations if you tell them not to.
Okay, what are Steve's thoughts about substituting AI-generated content in lieu of original writing? For example, is there an ethical line between a researcher using AI content in a client report and then attaching a copyright to that report?
I guess it depends. This is undecided. Right now, there's 330 people who on this Zoom meeting who are going to have 330 different answers. Every organization and industry will have to make its own rules. And just as genealogists have figured out the ethics for using DNA, we're going to have to figure out the ethics for using AI. And when does disclosure become mandatory? Probably not for spell checking or grammar checking. I wouldn't think so if you asked it to show me a list of, give me 10 ways in which I could make the attached report better. And then if I look at that list of 10 things and I implement one or two or all 10 of them, it's as if you had a proofreader looking at it. Now, in some fields, having people proofread your work and give you feedback is acceptable. In other fields, that may not be acceptable. And so every community is going to have to figure this out for themselves.
Okay, last one, because we want a little bit of time for an announcement and then the members to talk to each other. Do you have a list of recommended or suggested plugins to use?
I do. And I will share those. I'll tell you what, I'll put those in the Facebook group just as an incentive for folks. There's about 700 available and more each week. I've only used a small fraction. There's in the Facebook group, you can see how there's other ways to find the plugins. But the ones that read PDF files, the ones that give you access to the internet, the PDF files that create diagrams, if you have a need, if you're finding ChatGPT doesn't do what I want it to do, and you're paying the $20 a month, see if there's a plugin. See if a programmer has discovered that same limitation and wrote the plugin to solve that need.
Okay, so tell us one more time the name of the Facebook group, because they could go there to learn more or to ask questions, right? Is it Genealogy and Artificial Intelligence?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Great. So I want to do a little announcement and then we're going to open it up. So briefly, after we talked to Steve about doing this session for the members, right, to talk about AI, what it can do, what it can't do, we asked him to do a course for NGS. So if you were captivated by the things that he said we could do and you want to do more, we're going to do a hands-on 4-week course on the step-by-step of how to do the use cases that he described. He will be teaching about the OCR cleanup, using prompts in ChatGPT, extracting data from the obituary or a will, translating from an earlier century into modern English, and asking the program to use supplied data to write a narrative report. So each of these sessions, he'll do a presentation, he'll take questions, he'll give a homework assignment for us to try exactly what he was talking about or the use case, and then we'll come back and talk about that the following week and how that worked. There will be 2 sessions beginning on October 23rd, one at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, one at 7:30 in the evening. Registration will open for these tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and they are limited seats. So as soon as it fills, we're going to close it, but we'll put a waiting list on the website. So if we get more interest than we have space, we will open other sections. And this is the home page of NGS, the website, and there is a slider right here you can click on to get to the AI course, or we will also put the direct link for that in the website. In the chat. We'll put the direct link in the chat. So with that exciting announcement, we invite others to turn on their cameras and visit with each other for a few minutes. I'm going to unpin us so we can see other people.
That was 9 a.m. Eastern time, you said?
9
a.m. Eastern
a.m.
time.
Eastern.
Great job, Steve. Congratulations.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Steve.
thanks.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I have loved this past year working with this, and I excited to meet other people who enjoy the same thing. So it was a real privilege and honor to be with all of you tonight.
I did see our highest number of attendees, and somebody may have seen a little bit higher, but the highest number I saw was 443 on the Zoom tonight. So great job. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. We wanted to bring this to as many members. And then when it was posted on Facebook, there could have been some visitors along with our NGS members.
And I signed up for the Facebook group already, so hope others did too.
I will be looking for your homework assignment in
Okay.
2 weeks. I'll give everybody a week for the video and a week for the assignment. So 2 weeks from tonight, I'll be checking homework.
So this is the time where we allow people to chat, but we only have about 3 minutes before we expire. So if anybody has anything to say, we encourage you to do it quickly.
Quick question, please.
Oh.
So will the sessions be offered for searching in other languages other than English? For instance, my wife needs German and Slovenian.
When I tell people my master's work is in linguistics, they ask me how many languages I speak, and my response for 30 years has been, I struggle with English. So I will only be doing English, but I will be doing it mindful that regardless of the language we use, the underlying principles should be applicable to any language.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question. I was just wondering, with all these people, are you all from the United States, around the world? I'm from upstate New York.
Well, we definitely saw people from Canada, New Zealand, Australia at the beginning. If you're from another country, let us know. Turn on your mic or type in the chat.
So one other question, are there going to be possibilities to daisy chain sort of in the Microsoft terminology, co-pilots, but Google may and Meta may have different terminologies, but are there possibilities to daisy chain the bots together to be able to achieve more complicated results?
Yes. One of my long-term goals would be to teach genealogists how to do the most simple, I don't even want to call it programming, just scripting, I imagine a class scripting for genealogists, just doing the smallest amount of computer work necessary to have the AI start to do some of these things itself, being aware of what the use cases are. Because now if we've got a dozen use cases, one day that's going to be 50 or 100 different use cases. And having the artificial intelligence know what those uses are and how to combine them. When I showed you the network graph of the cemetery, I didn't ask for a network graph. Code Interpreter was brand new, and I said, here is a database of people in a cemetery. Show me something amazing. And it did. I didn't tell it to create a network graph. It took the information and realized, oh, these people are in relationship with one another. A network graph is a good way to show relationships, and it created that network graph without me even asking it to.
So the follow-up question then is do you anticipate having a course in prompt engineering?
1, 2, 3, up.
I would love that. We're going to level 1. I think Angela's calling what we're doing in October and November level 1. I deeply appreciated the possibility that is contained in calling that level 1.
Because we might do level 2 in 2024, right? Or I wasn't supposed to foreshadow. I think that's fun.
Angela, this was great. Steve, fantastic job.
Thank you, Steve, for answering so many questions. We got to most of them, but the others can be answered in the Facebook group.
Oh.
Well, again, it was my great honor to be here with y'all. I just want to acknowledge, I see Andrew from Australia, waving to Andrew, one of our Facebook friends and a serious researcher and contributor. If there's other folks, I see Linda, so many friends. Thank y'all for being here tonight. NGS, thank you. Tonight is my 9th wedding anniversary. So my wife gave me dispensation to be here with y'all tonight. She knows how exciting this has been for me. And so the only thing that would keep me away from my anniversary was about this.
Well, thank her for us.
And welcome. There were a couple of people that posted they're joining us from Germany.
Yes, welcome, Germany.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.